Oh, hello. As if the Deadpool movies weren't action-packed enough, we found some things you missed while laughing at the Merc with the mouth. We'll talk about why some scenes might have looked familiar to fans of the John Wick franchise, and how Deadpool 2 spoiled the end of Dark Phoenix. So if you haven't seen that movie yet, don't. It's not great.
Oh, that's because it's Christmas Day, Dopinder. And I'm after someone on my naughty list.
Since Dark Phoenix was filmed in Montreal, while Deadpool 2 was mostly filmed in Vancouver, it was a little tricky making this scene work. Deadpool 2 director David Leitch worked on this scene before sending it to Dark Phoenix director Simon Kinberg so he could frame the shot properly. A lot of collaboration went into this Easter egg, but somehow both directors overlooked the fact that it totally spoils Dark Phoenix. The mutants, Mystique and Jean Grey, are conspicuously absent from this scene, which clued some observant fans about their eventual fate when dealing with the Phoenix Force. To make a massive understatement, taking out the Juggernaut is not easy. It usually takes a whole team of heroes to even slow down this helmet-wearing behemoth, so it's not surprising Deadpool tried to calm him down during a confrontation. He says, "Hey, big guy, the sun's getting real low," which is kind of a weird thing to say, even by Deadpool's irreverent standards, but totally in keeping with his standards. This is actually a pop culture reference to another iconic comic book hero, the Incredible Hulk. We all know the relationship between Wade and Vanessa is a beautiful and occasionally strange thing, but whatever was going on between Natasha Romanoff and Bruce Banner was just awkward. In Avengers: Age of Ultron, she manages to coax the Hulk into turning back into Bruce Banner by saying this same line. It was also used as an Easter egg in the movie Thor: Ragnarok when the God of Thunder said it to Hulk during their battle.
Did I win?
No, I won, easily.
Doesn't sound right.
Well, it's true.
Living with roommates can be a challenge, especially when you're living in a mansion full of mutants. This deleted scene inside the X-Mansion shows the value of properly applying labels and keeping things organized, but one of the tags just says Wheels, which isn't the name of anyone living in the mansion. Or is it? Way back in the 2000 movie X-Men, Wheels is what Logan calls Professor Xavier when they meet. This is definitely one of the more obscure X-Men references in Deadpool 2, but it's definitely not the last. As a purveyor of pop culture, it's not surprising that Wade Wilson is familiar with the cinematic classics in the Sharknado franchise. After all, sharks are scary, tornadoes are scary. Put them together, and it's a perfect formula for terror. When Deadpool learns Cable is from the future, he asks the important questions like, is dubstep still a thing? And what Sharknado are we on? Now, the really funny part takes place in the masterpiece, The Last Sharknado, It's About Time. When Finn travels to the future, he wonders what Deadpool movie they're on. It's safe to say that most people who sit through movie credits aren't genuinely invested in learning who the best boy was on the film they just watched. They're just hoping their patience will be rewarded with a post-credit scene. But in Deadpool 2, they made sure people didn't tune out during the opening credits by making them more interesting, and not actually naming people who worked on the movie. In the first Deadpool movie, it says the film was written by the real heroes here. But in Deadpool 2, the credits read, "I blame the writers. Real heroes my..." Well, you get the picture? Wade Wilson clearly loves consuming fine films like Sharknado, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love reading a good book now and then. We see the Merc with the mouth immersed in a novel called The Canadian Mounted, which might look familiar. That's because it's the same book we saw John Candy's character reading in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And in case you're thinking of picking up a copy, we have some bad news. It's not a real book. Not only does this book create a connection between these two films, but it draws attention to the fact that both Ryan Reynolds and John Candy are Canadian. Since Disney now owns the movie rights to Deadpool, the Merc with the mouth's future is semi-uncertain. Will he join the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And if so, will he be allowed to bring his signature foul language along with him? Regardless of his future, he didn't miss an opportunity to take a jab at the DCEU. When Cable asks who he is, he replies, "I'm Batman," but in a growly voice, and remarks, "Wow, that's dark. Are you sure you're not from the DC universe?" Although we're not sure if he's talking about the gritty tone of DC Comics in general, or the dimly lit big screen productions created by Zack Snyder. During the mid-credits scene from Deadpool 2, Yukio and Negasonic Teenage Warhead work on repairing Cable's time travel device. When they don't fix it fast enough, Deadpool threatens to take it to the Genius Bar instead and calls Negasonic Teenage Warhead 11. It's not hard to see this is a reference to the popular Stranger Things character, 11. Right before things take a shift into unfortunate for our favorite Marvel couple, they're happily discussing baby names and taking in a movie. They happen to be watching the romantic musical drama Yentl. If you're not familiar with this 1983 classic, you should know it was directed, co-written, co-produced, and starred in by none other than the multi-talented Barbra Streisand. And if you're not familiar with Josh Brolin's family tree, you should also know that Barbra Streisand happens to be his stepmother. She's married to his father, actor and director James Brolin. If you're a fan of action movies, then you're probably familiar with the John Wick franchise. If so, you may have noticed some similarities between Deadpool 2 and this classic action flick. In fact, right in the opening credits, we see that this movie was directed by the person responsible for the loss of John Wick's precious little pooch, Daisy. Not only is this a reference to John Wick, but it's also a nod to director David Leitch. Not only did he direct Deadpool 2, but he made his directorial debut by co-directing the first John Wick film, along with Chad Stahelski. So if you think about it, David Leitch really is responsible for the loss of Sweet Daisy. What a monster. That nod to John Wick was pretty obvious, but here's one you might have missed. When we see Deadpool hard at work in the second film, he fights a bunch of people who are just trying to relax in a spa. This movie moment looks an awful lot like this scene from the first John Wick movie, as the titular character tries to hunt down the people for destroying his dog. The color, tone, and pacing of the two films is surprisingly similar, and there's one more connection. This scene from John Wick features the song Think by Kaleida, and the soundtrack was put together by Tyler Bates, who also worked on the music for Deadpool 2. The loss of Marvel comic book legend Stan Lee was a difficult one for many fans to cope with. Not only did he have a hand in creating some of our favorite fictional characters, but we all looked forward to seeing his always amusing film cameos. Well, while he did not make an in-person appearance in Deadpool 2, you might have seen a familiar face if you were paying close enough attention. While the heroes are trying to rescue Russell, Domino uses a parachute, and on her way down to the ground, she flies past a mural depicting the late great Stan Lee. We all know Celine Dion has a positively magical voice, and she's provided songs for some hit movies in the past. Well, if your heart is ready to go on and fall in love with a song again, give another listen to her song Ashes, which is played over the Deadpool 2 opening credits. It's an original piece, but it wasn't written for the film, at least not at first. Director David Leitch liked the idea of using a tune from Skyfall just to really drive home the James Bond connection, but Columbia Records had a different idea. They pitched Celine Dion's song Ashes, and it was a perfect fit. Not only was it a great addition to the movie, but it also gave Celine her third single to top Billboard's US dance club songs. Ryan Reynolds says he not only loves the song, but appreciates the fact that it was performed by fellow Canadian Celine Dion.
All right, you're at like an 11. We need to get you down to a 5, 5.5 tops. Just phone it in.
If you haven't seen This Is Spinal Tap, then what are you waiting for? This movie came out decades ago. It's a mockumentary about the fictional band Spinal Tap and pokes fun at stereotypical rock musician behavior. During one iconic scene, Nigel shows off the fact that his amplifier has been custom made to create volume knobs that go all the way up to 11. Although this wouldn't make the output any louder, he's convinced it does, and thus an idiom was born. When Deadpool gets a hold of Cable's gun during their prison battle, he turns it up to a healthy 7, but if you look closely, you can see the dial actually goes up to 11. Speaking of great 80s movies, let's take a look back at the classic martial arts film The Karate Kid. And yes, we're talking about the original, not the 2010 remake starring Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan. In the movie, Daniel LaRusso learns how to stand up to his bully, the unpleasant John Kreese, with the help of the kindly martial arts master, Mr. Miyagi. During a tournament, Bully John instructs fellow combatant Johnny Lawrence to sweep Daniel's leg, thus taking advantage of a known injury. It's a low blow, both literally and figuratively, and it's what Deadpool tells Colossus to do when they're preparing to go up against Juggernaut. Not only is this phrase so popular that Deadpool added it to his extensive collection of movie quotes, but it's also the name of an experimental rock band. The more you know. In the second movie, Deadpool interviews prospective heroes to join his team. Despite the high turnover rate, he had quite a few applications to choose from. But if you weren't too distracted by their interviews, you may have noticed an interesting decoration in the hallway behind them. It looks like a woman wearing a cowboy hat, and it might just be a mutant from Marvel Comics named Inez Temple, better known as Outlaw. Like Deadpool, Outlaw worked as a mercenary, and the two became acquainted when he ended up getting the credit for one of her jobs. She's super strong, damage resistant, and has an enhanced healing ability. While she's not quite on Deadpool's level in terms of power, we appreciate the fact that she's got a subtle cameo in the movie.
Just once I'm gonna find a planet of people that are worse than me at everything. I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna be their Superman.
Deadpool is strong, but it definitely helps that he has an arsenal of backup to choose from. He's handy with his swords, but we also noticed a familiar item during his interviews in Deadpool 2. Behind Deadpool is a classic Joker-style bang gun. After the funny bang flag is fired, it can unleash an actual projectile capable of dealing serious damage. Although it's associated with the Clown Prince, it does seem like the kind of thing Deadpool would have kicking around.
That gun is amazing.
While Wade isn't short on handy gadgets, sometimes he prefers to keep it simple with his dual swords. This seems to work well for him, most of the time. During the movie X-Men Origins Wolverine, he uses his blades to stop a hailstorm of bullets aimed directly at him. In this film, his plan to deflect them worked perfectly, but in Deadpool 2, well, not so much. This scene where Deadpool fights Cable is definitely supposed to pay homage to his appearance in that unfortunate film. But unlike in X-Men Origins Wolverine, it isn't very effective since Deadpool still ends up full of holes after flailing his blades around. Thank goodness for that incredible healing ability. Even if you're the most unobservant moviegoer out there, you probably noticed a ton of references to the X-Men and Wolverine in particular. We all love the bromance between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, so these scenes are always a hit with fans. While Deadpool is working as an X-Men trainee, he crashes through a wall and decides to stop and sign something for a young fan. He picks up a box of everyone's favorite cereal, Hero Flakes, which of course has a picture of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine on the box. But when Deadpool leaves his signature behind, we can see that he actually signed it as Ryan Reynolds instead of Deadpool. After losing the love of his life, our hero Deadpool loses the will to live and tries to take his own life. Of course, this is tragic, but it's made amusing by the fact that he simply can't do it thanks to his fantastic healing ability. In addition to igniting a bunch of explosive material, he also tries to take a trip to see some polar bears at the zoo on an up-close and personal basis. Obviously, he survived his polar bear encounter, but did you wonder how they came up with this particular method? All the way back in 2009, a woman climbed over safety walls at the Berlin Zoo and got way too close to the polar bears. And for the record, too close is anywhere over those safety walls. Apparently, the woman was depressed following the loss of her job and decided to take her own life. Fortunately, the plan didn't work, and both the woman and the bears survived. It's no secret that Wade and Vanessa are an adorable, if occasionally tragic couple. And speaking of adorable yet tragic couples, we have this deleted scene from Deadpool 2. During Deadpool's attempts to take his own life, he finds himself sitting on a park bench when he's joined by a sweet elderly couple who look somewhat familiar. Yes, this is supposed to be Carl and Ellie from Pixar's famous film Up. Ellie is even holding a bunch of balloons just to really drive the point home. Frankly, as far as we're concerned, this scene was cut in order to allow the canon that Russell from Up is the same Russell in Deadpool 2. As we mentioned earlier, there's a ton of references to Wolverine and the X-Men in the Deadpool franchise, but this one is a dedication directly to actor Hugh Jackman. We all love him as Logan, but don't forget that he's been in other movies too. When Deadpool presents his plan, he includes a drawing he made himself. The DMC prison has a drawing of an incarcerated Wolverine with the label Prisoner 24601. This is actually a reference to Jackman's role in the movie Les Miserables, where he portrayed prisoner Jean Valjean. In that movie, 24601 was Jean Valjean's inmate number, although he wasn't a mutant in Les Miserables, at least as far as we know. When we first meet Russell in Deadpool 2, we see that one of the headlines in the news ticker reads, "Christopher Plummer refuses role in Deadpool 2. You might know this star from his role as Captain George Von Trapp in The Sound of Music, but he has quite a few other films on his resume. Plummer also ended up replacing Kevin Spacey in All the Money in the World, a role which earned him a nomination for the Best Supporting Actor Academy Award. After TJ Miller received some bad publicity, there was some speculation his part in Deadpool 2 would be recast or omitted. Some fans wonder if Plummer was asked to replace him in the way he had replaced Kevin Spacey, but turned down the opportunity.
If you want to be a contract killer, you gotta handle a mop before you handle a gun.
Playgrounds are supposed to be places for kids to have fun, but occasionally they're also the scene of superpowered humans fighting against one another like we saw in Deadpool 2. And if you thought this scene looked familiar, that's because it's just like the one we saw in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. In this movie, Sarah Connor has a dream set on a playground that ends up with a tremendous amount of fire, you know, like the kind Russell is always conjuring. Let's finish this up with a tribute to another team of Canadian superheroes, Alpha Fight. We've seen a taxi sign promoting this team who are straight from the pages of Marvel Comics. Like most superhero teams, there's been some employee turnover, but the group has featured many mutants and other superpowered people including Aurora, Guardian, and Northstar.
You're my Tom Cruise.
And you're my Kristen Dunst. Kirsten?
Did we manage to spot your favorite Deadpool Easter egg? If not, make sure to tell us about what we missed in the comments section, and don't forget to stay up to date by clicking on the subscribe button and turning on your notifications. We'll see you next time.